A German Focke-Wulf 190 skims across a French airstrip with its landing gear still buried inside the wings. American gunners swing their weapons toward it. The fighter hits the grass, tears a long scar through the mud, and stops. Then the canopy opens. The man climbing out is not German. He is an American fighter pilot. His name is Bruce Carr, and for decades that impossible landing has been repeated as one of the wildest escape stories of World War II. There is only one problem. The records that should prove it do not. The famous version begins in November of 1944. Carr is said to have been flying a Mustang on a ground attack mission when German fire tears into his engine somewhere deep behind enemy lines. He bails out, lands alone, and spends several days moving through frozen country while German patrols search for him. No radio, little food, no friendly troops for miles. Eventually, the story says he reaches a Luftwaffe airfield and prepares to surrender. But from the trees he sees two mechanics service a fully fueled W190. They test the engine, they leave the aircraft ready, and Carr changes his mind. Before dawn he crosses the open ground, climbs into a cockpit covered in German labels, and begins working by instinct. Throttle, stick, rudder pedals, magnetos, starter. He has never flown the aircraft. He cannot read the controls, but the legend says he gets the BMW radial engine running, races between two hangars, and lifts off while German ground crews pour onto the field. Then comes the part everyone remembers. Carr flies west at treetop height in a German fighter, crosses the front, survives fire from his own side, reaches his unit, cannot lower the landing gear, and slides the Focke-Wulf onto its belly. Ground troops surround the aircraft. The canopy opens. An American climbs out. It is a perfect war story, a desperate pilot, an enemy machine, a one-way escape built from nerve and mechanical instinct. It is also a story that becomes harder to defend the closer anyone looks. A combat loss that dramatic should leave paperwork. There should be a missing aircraft report for Carr's American fighter. There should be an evasion report describing how he returned from enemy territory. There should be a captured aircraft trail for the German fighter that arrived at an Allied airfield. And there should be some mention in the history of the 354th Fighter Group. But researchers have pointed out that those records have not surfaced. The official unit history does not preserve the episode. The expected loss and evasion documents are missing. Even the most famous dialogue attached to the landing appears to have grown through repetition rather than documentation. That does not prove that every fragment is impossible. Wartime records were incomplete, stories were compressed. Pilots exaggerated in bars, mechanics improved punchlines, and one good anecdote could travel faster than any official correction. But it does mean the stolen FW-190 should be treated as a legend connected to Bruce Carr, not as a cleanly verified combat report. And this is where the story becomes more interesting. Because Bruce Carr never needed the Focke-Wulf story. The documented record was already extraordinary. Carr was born in New York in 1924 and began flying as a teenager. He entered the Army Air Forces in 1942 with more cockpit experience than many new cadets. By 1944, he was flying combat in Europe. He joined the 354th Fighter Group, known as the Pioneer Mustang Group, a unit that helped prove the P-51 could escort American bombers deep into German-controlled airspace. Carr quickly earned a reputation for aggressive flying, not theatrical aggression, not recklessness for its own sake. He closed distance, he stayed with damaged wingmen. He pressed attacks after hesitation would have made the safer choice. In September of 1944, his flight encountered a large formation of German fighters. Carr shot down 3 and then broke away from further opportunities to escort a damaged American aircraft home. That mission brought him the Silver Star. By the final months of the war, he was already an ace. Then, on April 2, 1945, the event that should define Bruce Carr actually happened. Carr was leading 3 other American fighters on a reconnaissance mission near Schweinfurt, Germany. Above them was a formation of roughly 60 Luftwaffe aircraft, Messerschmitt 109s, Focke-Wulf 190s. The Germans held the altitude advantage. They held the numbers, and they were positioned to decide whether a fight happened at all. 4 against 60 was not bravery on paper. It was arithmetic against survival. The correct response was to disengage, report the formation, and live long enough to fight under better conditions. Carr attacked. The 4 American fighters climbed into the German formation. That decision created confusion before the first burst was fired. The Luftwaffe pilots could see an attack coming, but the attack made no sense. A small flight should have turned away. Instead, the Mustangs drove upward through the formation and forced dozens of German pilots to react at once. Carr moved fast. He fired, broke away, changed position, and attacked again before the larger force could organize around him. 1 German fighter went down. then another, then a third. The engagement became a chain of seconds. Angle, range, burst, break. No speech, no grand gesture. Just a pilot reading speed and distance faster than the men trying to kill him. By the end of the fight, Carr had destroyed 5 enemy aircraft and damaged a 6th. His flight was credited with 15. All 4 American pilots returned. For that action, Carr received the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest decoration for extraordinary heroism in combat. The citation did not need a stolen aircraft. It described a pilot attacking despite overwhelming numerical superiority and the enemy's advantage in altitude. That was enough. Carr finished the Second World War with 172 combat missions and roughly 15 aerial victories. Depending on how shared and confirmed credits are counted, he was only 21, and he kept flying. During the Korean War, he flew 57 combat missions in the F-86 Sabre. In Vietnam, now a colonel, he flew 286 combat missions in the F-100 Super Sabre. 3 wars, 3 generations of fighter aircraft, 515 combat missions in all. That is the danger of a perfect legend. It can become so bright that the real man disappears behind it. The FW-190 story gives us a stolen machine, German searchlights, Allied guns, and a muddy belly landing. The documented Carr gives us something less cinematic and more difficult to dismiss. A teenage pilot who became an ace, a flight leader who protected a damaged wingman, a 21-year-old who took 4 fighters into a formation of roughly 60 and brought all 4 Americans home. Maybe Bruce Carr stole a German fighter. Maybe pieces of a smaller event grew into a story too good to die. But the honest version does not make him smaller. It removes the one achievement he never needed. The stolen fighter may belong to folklore. Bruce Carr's courage does not.